What's up guys, today I thought we'd kick things off with something fun, and that's creating a tier list of the most exciting MMA fighters in the UFC. And if I missed any of your favorite fighters, I apologize. These are just the ones that came to mind first. I started putting them together quickly, so if your favorite fighter isn't included, I just mostly forgot about them. With all that being said, let's start the list. And let's start with Charles Oliveira. I'm gonna place him in A tier because between 2021 and 2022, he had some amazing and entertaining brawls with fighters like Gaethje, Poirier, and Chandler. However, since he lost the belt, his fights haven't been as thrilling, except the one with Beneil where he just knocked him out. That was actually pretty fun to watch. But the fighters he's been fighting lately are wrestlers, and they usually tend to slow down the action, making Charles more hesitant on the feet. I'm still saying that Charles is entertaining, but when he fights grapplers, especially wrestlers, he tends to be more cautious. However, if he's facing a brawler or a striker, you can expect an all-out war with Oliveira, throwing everything on the feet. Personally, I find him exciting, which is why I'm just going to put him in the A tier just to be safe. Next up, we got Benoit Saint-Denis. This guy is incredibly fun to watch. He throws caution to the wind and fights like his life depends on it. While his defense might be lacking, offensively, he throws everything but the kitchen sink. That's definitely S tier material if you ask me. One of my personal favorite fights is when he fought Dustin Poirier, and sure, he might have gotten exposed in that fight, but that's still up for debate if you ask me. Let's not overlook how entertaining this guy is. He has incredible fights. Besides that fight with Dustin Poirier, he had amazing fun fights with Matt Frevola, Thiago Moises, and Bonfim. They were all fantastic. Now let's talk about Yuri Prochazka, another S tier for this man. Yuri is an incredible, entertaining fighter. He can usually take all the damage you throw at him and still get back up on his feet and somehow manage to knock you out. Unless your name is Alex Pereira. Just look at his other fights. The spinning elbow knockout of Dominic Reyes was epic, and the fight against Glover Teixeira is arguably one of the best fights I've ever seen. The entire samurai gimmick is pretty intense, and now I'm convinced it's not really a gimmick. He's just crazy. I'm hoping he continues his career because I think he mentioned something about retiring, and I hope that's not the case, man. There are so many potential bangers he can have, like fights with Jamal Hill, Ankalaev, and Jan Blachowicz. Moving on, now we have Alex Pereira. I'm placing him in the A tier. Alex is incredibly entertaining to watch, not just for his fighting style, but also for his overall aura. He's got that stone face intensity. He had some thrilling bouts recently, including a dominating win over Yuri, and his dominant win over Jamal Hill. The first fight between Alex and Yuri was also entertaining and competitive. His fight with Jan Blachowicz was a bit slower, and I can understand why a casual viewer might find it boring, but I personally found it entertaining. And of course, the two fights between Alex and Izzy were amazing. If you didn't find those fights exciting, maybe you should go watch soccer or something. But seriously, I love watching Alex. His left hand is something special. When it connects, opponents practically disintegrate. He's just incredibly fun to watch, man. Next up, we got Aljamain Sterling. He's a D tier when it comes to entertainment in that cage for me. Most of his fights are boring, with the last decent one being the one when he lost to Sean O'Malley. His bout with Peter Yan and Henry Cejudo were alright, but his recent fight with Kattar was a snooze fest. In my opinion, he's the perfect D tier fighter. Moving on, we have Dustin Poirier. I've got to be real with you, he belongs in the S tier. Dustin has consistently delivered incredible fights, regardless of the opponent's style. His recent bout with Islam Makhachev is just one example. Look at his track record. He had fights with Islam Makhachev, Benoit Saint-Denis, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, Conor McGregor, Dan Hooker, and Eddie Alvarez. Every one of those matches were barn burners. I think that's why majority of the fans don't want him to retire yet. He has so much left in the tank, and he's always fun to watch. Personally, I don't want to see him retire either. So yeah, Dustin has to be S tier. Up next is Mateusz Gamera, another D tier fighter. Majority of his fights are boring, and he's easily one of my least favorite fighters. He tries to out-wrestle you for the entire fight until he gets the victory by unanimous decision. The only decent fight he had was against Beneil Dariush and Arman Tsarukyan. Every other fight besides those have been snooze fest. If there was an F tier, I would put him there because that's how boring I find him. Next, we have Ian Garry, who also belongs in D tier. His last three performances have been lackluster and boring. At first I had high hopes for him, thinking he'd be knocking out people like Conor McGregor, but ever since he entered the top 10, his style has become very cautious, boring, leg kicking, clinch fest. It's just absolutely dull, and I don't like him, so D tier it is. Next fighter we have on the list is Israel Adesanya. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, he's at D tier in terms of entertainment. Most of his title defenses have been boring. Now don't get me wrong, before he became a champion, he used to take more risks. I understand why he doesn't take that many risks anymore. Now he's trying to be a long reigning champion and avoid losing. I'm aware he lost to Sean Strickland, but hopefully that changes his style. But hey, if it doesn't and it keeps helping him get the win and it works, I can't really criticize it too much. However, I will criticize that he is boring. The only exciting fight that comes to mind are his bouts with Alex Pereira and Kelvin Gastelum. Next fighter we have is Tom Aspinall. And this one was tough because you can arguably put him in the S tier since most of his fights end in the first round. But for now, I think I'm gonna place him in the A tier. He's a must-watch fighter, and he's very close from being S tier. Tom is already one of the greatest heavyweight fighters of all time. He's beaten top names like Sergey Pavlovich, Arbura, Alex Volkov, and Sergey Spivak all in the first round. Every time Tom fights, it's a must-watch event. He's the kind of guy you want to show your friends like, hey, check this out. He takes everyone out in the first round. He's crazy and he's awesome. Next, we have Sean O'Malley. Sean is definitely S tier. His fighting style is incredibly fun and even beautiful to watch. While his personality might be lacking, there's no denying he's one of the best strikers in the UFC, especially with his impressive counters. And I can't remember the last time he had a boring fight. The fight against Chito Vera was very dominant and exciting to watch, and his bout with Aljamain Sterling was alright, but that ending sequence made up for it, especially with the upset victory. The fight with Peter Yan was controversial, but overall, it was a war. Overall, Sean always puts on an entertaining show, which is why I love watching him fight. So yeah, he's definitely S tier. Next up, we have Conor McGregor. Easy S tier. The guy is the full package when it comes to entertainment, both inside and outside the octagon. His last two fights with Dustin Poirier were entertaining, and the same goes for his bout with Donald Cerrone. Even the fight with Khabib, despite its chaotic ending. Conor always brings excitement to his fight. There's really not much to say that hasn't already been said about the dude, so yeah, he's definitely S tier. Another fighter we have on the list is Michael Chandler. Chandler is one of the most entertaining fighters, although he hasn't been very active recently as he's waiting for Conor McGregor. He's definitely S tier. Every fight Chandler has is must watch. He may lack fight IQ, but that's the part of him that makes him so fun to watch. He loves to stand and bang, going for those crazy knockouts. Chandler is the full package, so yeah, he's definitely S tier as well. We don't know if he's gonna fight in the octagon soon, but hopefully he does. I'm sure he'll deliver another classic if he does, even if he loses due to questionable fight IQ. He's just so fun to watch, man. Next up is Leon Edwards. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Leon Edwards is extremely boring, arguably the most boring champion in the UFC right now. He's a point fighter, and I can't really recall the last time he had an exciting fight. I'm putting him in the D tier. All he does is throw leg kicks, and while some people might enjoy that, I don't really find it entertaining at all. He's pretty much the welterweight version of Izzy, and the less said about Leon, the better. Up next, we have Cody Garbrandt. He's definitely a C tier. Sometimes he knocks out his opponents, and the other time he usually gets knocked out, but either way, it's usually entertaining. He has some very lackluster performance, like against Figgy and Rob Font, but you never know what you're going to get with Cody. Next up, we have Paulo Costa, the meme god. He's in the B tier. He usually has very good fights, even though he loses most of them. His last fight against Sean Strickland was a bit of a stinker, but aside from that, he typically delivers bangers. Like his fight with Robert Whittaker, Luke Rockhold, Marvin Vettori, and Yoel Romero. His last fight left a very bad taste in my mouth, so I can't put him in A tier, but Costa is generally a must-watch fighter. Up next, we have Justin Gaethje. The dude possesses some crazy countering power, but I won't lie, his fights haven't been the most entertaining recently. Besides the one with Max, his bout with Dustin was alright, and the same thing could be said with the fight with Rafael Fiziev. However, he did have a good fight with Charles Oliveira, so I'm gonna put Justin in the B tier because he's really hit or miss sometimes when it comes to these entertaining fights. Next we have is Ilia Topuria. I'm placing him in A tier. His boxing combinations and his powers are incredible. The way he drops people left and right recently has looked awesome, and his knockout power has been on display time after time. Whenever Topuria is fighting, you know your eyes are glued to the TV screen. Up next is Alex Volkanovski. Alex is a phenomenal fighter who consistently outclasses his opponents. However, if I'm gonna be honest, I'd put Alex in the C tier. He has amazing performance, but they're not usually the wild, crazy fights that grab people's attention. The closest one I can think of is the one with Islam Makhachev and the second fight with Max Holloway. Next we have Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev is D tier. When it comes to entertainment, I can't remember the last time he had a fun fight. I don't think he ever had one, to be honest. He's very boring, but at the same time, he's very well rounded. I will give him his respect for that, but there's not a fight I would ever recommend for you to watch. As a fighter now, he's very good, but when it comes to fun fights, they are not entertaining. Next up, we have Brian Ortega. Ortega is C tier when it comes to entertainment, but I'm not gonna lie, it is kind of entertaining when he gets beat up. But besides that, he just has nice submissions and nice transitions. I don't think the average viewer would find him that very interesting or entertaining, but personally, I think he's okay. Next person we have is Ciryl Gane. Gane is C tier. He has a lot of boring fights, but he's so fast with his movements, it looks nice. However, he doesn't have that much power. It seems like he needs to hit you 30 times to get a reaction. Despite that, his movement and his overall skills can be impressive, so that's why I believe he's C tier at best. Next up is Islam Makhachev. Islam is entertaining. I feel like he gets too much flack just because he's Dagestani. His last performance with Dustin was so fun to watch, and the same thing could be said about his first fight with Alex. Islam is full-rounded and arguably one of the best fighters to ever lace up a pair of MMA gloves. The truth is that he takes more risks than his protege Khabib, and so far it's been paying off by being more entertaining to watch. That's why I love to see Islam fight. To make a safe pick, I'm gonna put him in the B tier, but to be fair, he can almost be in A tier. The next fighter we have is Sean Strickland. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Sean Strickland is pretty boring. Sure, he outclassed Izzy with an amazing performance, and he had a good fight with Jerkis, but most of his other fights have been very boring. It's kind of funny because he always talks about going on a war, but then he ends up going all 5 rounds without much excitement, just like the Paulo Costa fight. So I would put Sean Strickland in the C tier. The next fighter we have is Belal Muhammad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Belal Muhammad is one of the most boring fighters in the UFC. He's the type of guy you don't want to show to any of your friends. He's just that simply boring. So he's definitely going to the D tier. The only decent fight he ever had was against Sean Brady, but even then, he kind of messed it up in his next fight with Gilbert Burns. He fought so many times, and I've nearly fallen asleep during most of his fights. It's crazy that he's getting the next title shot, and I could tell that the UFC is praying that they don't want him to win the belt because he is boring. But I do feel bad for him because he gets a lot of hate, but honestly, if Belal never fought again, I'm pretty sure a lot of people wouldn't even notice. The next fighter we have is Anthony Smith. I put him in C tier. Although he's not doing great lately, I find it entertaining when he does get beat up in the octagon. I can't stand him sometimes, but his fights are interesting to watch too sometimes. And for his sakes though, he might want to consider retiring soon because if I'm not mistaken, he just took a bunch of losses. I know he beat Vitor Petrino, but I feel like Vitor was just dumb and gave him an easy win with that guillotine. But just in general, I just think he's washed up. Up next, we have Bryce Mitchell. I'll be honest, his style is just okay. He had some good fights with Ilia Topuria and Josh Emmett, and it's kind of funny because those fights I just mentioned, he got knocked out, which is oddly entertaining. But I'll put him in C tier. His performances aren't the worst, but they aren't the best either. I might be biased, but that's just my take. The next fighter we have is Dricus du Plessis, and for me, he's S tier. None of his fights have been boring. He's like a tank, always standing and trying to bang with his opponents. Despite looking like he might struggle in the stand-up, somehow he manages to outlast and beat his opponents. His ability to time and catch fighters like Robert Whittaker and Sean Strickland is impressive. He is very underrated and easily an S tier fighter. Next up is Michel Pereira. I like this guy a lot. He does a lot of flips, crazy stuff, and he's super athletic. He moves like he's in the Mortal Kombat games. I'm gonna put him in A tier. I can't put him in S tier because he hasn't really had a dog fight yet. Up next we have Arman Tsarukyan. He can be a hit or miss. He had good fights with Gamera, and I thought his fight with Charles was quite entertaining. He isn't someone who's gonna wow you, but I do think he's entertaining by his grappling and his kicks. He has some nice finishes lately, like the knockout of Beneil Dariush, so I'm gonna put Armin in C tier. Next up, we got Jailton Almeida. I think he's boring as hell, but I will give him credit. His finishes are cool for the most part, as he finishes all his opponents in the first round. But it is entertaining to me personally because he's out grappling these fat old heavyweights. And when he did get tested, he got TKO'd by Curtis Blades. So I'm just gonna put Jailton in D tier. Next, we have MVP. He's fun to watch when he's able to stand and bang with his opponent, just like how he did with Kevin Holland. But when he faces an all-around fighter who's capable of grappling and striking, it can be extremely boring. And at that point, it just turns into a boring fight when they know how to grapple, as we saw with Ian Gary. So MVP can be a very hit or miss depending on who's fighting. But I'm gonna put MVP in the C tier. Finally, we have Max Holloway. Max is a phenomenal fighter and has had a ton of barn burners with the likes of Justin Gaethje, Arnold Allen, TKZ. He's just so fun to watch, man. And his volume striking is amazing when he decides to use it, and his counter striking game is also top notch. Max is just that guy, and there's not really much to say about him that hasn't already been said. He's definitely S tier. Overall, that's my tier list, and this is probably my longest video today, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it might be a little bit controversial, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was honestly a blast to make, and if you guys enjoyed these types of videos, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll continue making these type of videos. But anyways, guys, that's the end, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like always, guys, I'll see you on my next one.